And one of the most, as a writer and a teacher and a author, one of the most humble experiences is when people invite you into their personal lives. And because there's nothing more sacred and more dignified than the human life journey. So in that sense, I feel like I'm one of your family, and I am very glad to be here. I'd like to share a few words about the book. I'm firstly very touched by the fact that you've been going, like you said, with a scalpel through each chapter, and that it's like an intimate connection, even though maybe this is the first time we meet, but the words that a person puts on paper, according to the Torah, according to Judaism, very much captures their individual soul. So I committed my whole life. I was a student and a listener to the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, which required quite effort, because on Shabbat and the holidays, when no notes could be taken and no recordings made, we had to remember hours and hours verbatim of the Rebbe's words, which required a tremendous amount of concentration to absorb and retain, like a dry sponge. So you have to like empty your mind and absorb the ideas and teachings of the master, which in many ways changed my life. So when after the Rebbe's passing 26 years ago is when the book was published. I actually began writing it before that. It was my way of like repaying my debt, where I felt that the Rebbe's powerful teachings, which really encompass all of Judaism's teachings that go back thousands of years, the wisdom of life that has both empowered us as a people, but has also changed the world, that the best tribute could be is to put it into writing, into a book. And therefore, when I hear so many years later, these teachings continue to resonate and they continue to affect people's lives, there's nothing more gratifying than that, because that's the ultimate success of any type of work one does, is when it impacts others and in turn has multi-generational impact, student to teacher to student, and so on. Among many different experiences I've had with this book, and there are many, after the book was published, the publisher sent me on a book tour where I traveled across the United States and the world, speaking in bookstores and signing books, and it was a 90-city tour that they sent me on. So I had many interactions with people of all walks of life, both Jewish, not Jewish, religious, not religious, men, women, atheists, believers, you name it. And there's so many stories I can share with you, but there's one particular one that I want to share. For me, it was a very, we'll call it a life-defining moment. And it was quite heart-wrenching as well. But it captures, in my mind, so much of the essence of the challenges we face today in our world. That on one hand, we have so much technology and we have so many communications and medical breakthroughs and advancements. And on the other hand, in our personal lives, our relationships, our marriages, our intimacy, our internal psychological challenges, fears, things have not necessarily become improved due to the fact that we have smartphones and social media. So we all looking for, how do you live a more meaningful, a more happy, a more complete and fulfilling life, which of course is the theme of the book. So here's a story I'd like to share with you. And it happened over 20 years ago, but it still lives with me like it's happened today. And especially in our times after the pandemic, or we're still in the pandemic, however you define it, all the challenges and the disruptions and upheavals of our lives. And of course, I should mention that our prayers and hearts and souls go out to the families and to those that are still unaccounted for in Surfside, Florida, because a tragedy anywhere is a tragedy for us all. So I don't want to neglect mentioning that. So when living in such challenging times, each one in our own way, I think this story, which captures so much of the essence of the book and the message, can help us, each one of us, in our own particular way. And here's the story. So this was in St. Louis, Missouri. And the year was, it's more than 20 years, actually almost 25 years, to be honest. It's more like 1996, I believe it happened. And I traveled then on a book tour, as I mentioned. So one of the cities was St. Louis, Missouri. Now, in St. Louis, that night happened to be a big event because they were commemorating the tragic assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin from Israel. So many people came out that night. And I was the featured speaker, not because it just happened to be that night, because I was already scheduled to come. So there were literally around 2,000 to 3,000 people. After I finished my talk, so people lined up for me to sign books. That's the custom. I was signing books. And then I sign books, people speak to me, etc. When I get back to New York, where I'm based, I receive a letter from a woman. And I remember every word of the letter. It's like etched in my psyche. So I'll read it to you from memory. She writes to me, I am a 47-year-old executive from St. Louis. I was in the audience the evening you spoke. It was a Monday night. And I lined up to come over to speak to you, but it was a long line. And then I also got cold feet. So I decided instead I'm going to put it in writing, what I'd like to share with you. And this is what she writes. She writes, I am an accomplished, successful businesswoman. Everybody in this city knows me. Everyone considers me a success story because I've made money, I'm well connected, I have a high social status. But the truth is, she writes, that beneath the veneer of success lies a woman in shreds. You see, my soul was murdered when I was a child. I grew up in a very dysfunctional and abusive home, and my soul was murdered through physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse that literally destroyed my whole insides, my whole self-esteem. I loathe myself. And as the years have passed, I have not been able to develop a relationship with anyone. And intimacy is very messed up. I don't trust people. People don't trust me. And it's been a very, very difficult life. Now, people like myself who lack inner control of our lives, what we do is we create outer control. So I became very driven, workaholic to succeed, some way to cover up on the inner pain. But the truth be told, with all that I've done, it's all surface and superficial. Inside, I cry every day. I sometimes have to fight suicidal thoughts. And every morning is a challenge to wake up. And I've tried different types of therapy. This is all what she's writing to me. Different types of therapy, nothing has really worked. And I've given up hope, more or less. So what I do is every day is a struggle. I wake up, I breathe in, I breathe out, and I just take it day by day. One day, a few weeks ago, someone gave me a copy of your book, Toward a Meaningful Life. I'm Jewish, but I'm unaffiliated. I don't go to any synagogue. I actually avoid anything Jewish because anything connected to my parents, I go the other direction. But this book, so I was browsing through the book. I didn't know if I would read it or not. And then one line jumped out at me. One line jumped out at me. It was in the chapter on birth. So you have at the beginning of each chapter a quote. And there you're right, birth is God saying, you matter. And it like struck me like a lightning bolt between my eyes. Something touched me very deeply. And I read it again. Birth is God saying you matter. And I read it a third time. Birth is God saying you matter. And I will read this line the rest of my entire life. Suddenly, I had an epiphany, struck by a truth that I'd never realized. I don't know why, but in 47 years, that despite what my parents told me or did to me, that I was worthless, and they constantly criticized and constantly hurt me. And despite what society tells us, that our value is based nothing more than a statistic on someone's balance sheet, that our value is based on our looks, on our productivity, on buying power, on equity, on social status, how many people like you. Despite all that, I matter to the one that matters most, and that is God. Because God put me here and gave me life and created me and said, you're my child. I need you. I need you to accomplish something in this world that you and only you can accomplish. And then she continues. This is to conclude her letter. It would be eloquent if it weren't under the circumstances. She writes, so though I have many years to heal, but now I have hope. The work I have cut out for me will consist of creating bypass surgery to bypass the infected arteries that polluted my life due to the abuse and all the dysfunctionality around me, and reconnect to that pure moment of birth, to my heart, to that pure moment of birth when God said, you are my child. I love you unconditionally, despite what you look like, despite what you produce, despite whether other people are happy or not happy with you, despite how much money you have. I love you unconditionally. You are indispensable. Your life matters forever and ever. And then she concludes her note to me saying, so thank you for giving me back my life. That was the letter, almost word for word. So let me share with you what happened afterwards. When I was reading it, and especially at the conclusion, I could not control myself from bursting out crying. I was so touched. I literally was overwhelmed. First of all, a woman sharing her sacred space with me. She doesn't even know me. And she's sharing this vulnerable and very precious experience of her life, with all the pain. So that was number one. Number two, I actually went back to read the book. I went back to read my own book. I went back to read this chapter because, you know, when you write a book, you write it, you're the author. But once it's published, it belongs to the reader, not to the author anymore. And I wanted to see it from her eyes, from her perspective. So I read it and I saw it very differently than when I wrote it. Not different, the words weren't different, but the impact. And I read it and I said, wow, I can't believe that words like that could have such an impact on this woman. And I thought to myself also, the tribute to the Rebbe himself, you know, the theme, the central theme that he would always focus on, that you matter, absolutely. Even though there are 8 billion people on this planet, you and only you can contribute something that belongs uniquely to you. So I wrote her back a letter, obviously thanking her and offering all my support in any way I can be a friend to her. I asked her permission to tell the story. She gave me permission, obviously. And she asked me not to share her name because she says, you know, I'm sure people want to probably console me or other people may have a similar story. So she's always asked me, we're still in touch. It's years later. And I have learned so much from this story and from this woman. One of the main things that I discovered, I started thinking to myself, you know, do I think I matter? And I have to tell you, I'm a public speaker. I travel, I speak to many audiences, to literally I've spoken to, probably I've asked this question to over a few 100,000 people directly. Do you think you really matter? Now, initially everybody giggles, like, what does that mean? What kind of question is that? But then when I rephrase it and I say, let me put it this way, you know, because everybody thinks they matter. I have a healthy ego. My family tells me I'm important. I have a plaque on the wall. I've accomplished this. I built a business. I built a family. You know, everybody has things that they can be proud of. So I said, let's rephrase the question. If you were never born, would it make a difference to anyone? Remember, once you're here, obviously you justify circumstantially your existence. But if you were never born, nobody is expecting you. So it wouldn't be a tragedy if you didn't show up because no one even thought you're coming. So would it make a difference? In other words, not that you matter once you're here. Obviously, you matter to your family, to your loved ones, to your friends and community, and by extension to others. But does that mean you're indispensable? That means that this world would not be different without you? Would something on a cosmic level be missing? And I asked myself this question as well. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My parents are Russian born. And of course, the oldest is always a bit spoiled. You could ask my siblings. As they say, siblings go to therapy for their older sibling, I don't have to go to therapy for them, as the joke goes. But the bottom line is that I'm the oldest. So, my parents, no parents are perfect, but they loved me, they spoiled me. So I feel I'm valuable. But then hearing the story of this woman from St. Louis, I said to myself, 1 second, am I valuable because my parents said I'm valuable? And God forbid one day they wake up and they say, hey, you're not so important. So my stocks go down, my value goes down. And I wrote back to this woman, I said, you've taught me something, because the reason we are valuable and the reason we matter is not because people tell us we matter, because that can change. That's very circumstantial, that can change, it's very arbitrary. We matter because that you came to the truth, because you did not have the luxury of growing up in a home where you were nurtured and validated and supported. You came from darkness. And they say sometimes the eclipse of the sun illuminates the sunlight more than the sun does. And that your eclipse, your darkness, taught you the most important truth. And it taught me the most important truth, that we really matter because God put us here. It's the only reason, because that's the only thing that gives us absolute value. Obviously, having healthy parents and a family and a community and co-workers and colleagues and teachers and students and so on, and friends, validate and help nurture that element. But the very fact, as the Torah says, and this is the single most important message that the Bible begins with, you were created in the divine image. You're a piece of godliness in this world. That means you have something absolute and indispensable to contribute. Because everybody asks that question. There are 8 billion people, there are almost 8 billion people on this planet. What difference does it make? It's like a grain of sand on a beach. What could one grain of sand significant among billions of grains of sand? And yet, each one of us has something unique. We were put here. And yes, birth is God saying you matter. So I've taken this theme to the point where I realized from a purely psychological point of view, that maybe the driving ambition that so many of us have is perhaps covering up a certain insecurity or fear that maybe we don't really matter after all in the big scheme of things. So we create all kinds of monuments to ourselves and honor ourselves and have others honor us, maybe to cover that up. But this truth that I learned from this St. Louis woman is what I'm sharing here, to me is the essence of it all. Because if you matter, then your choices matter. Then your decisions matter. Then the people, your relationships matter. Everything matters. If you're not that significant, who really cares? What difference does it make? Someone invites you, for example, to come tomorrow morning, let's go and visit the hospital to visit some sick people, God forbid, at 7 o'clock in the morning. Who wants to go 7 o'clock, schlep out of bed? So you say, do you really need me? And if the person tells you, what, if you don't come, it's also fine. Who's going to go? If you don't feel necessary, and if it's optional, but if you're told you're needed, we cannot do the job without you, it changes everything. And that's what each one of us is told. And that's what we say every morning in the prayer, the beautiful prayer that the Jewish tradition, the prayer of Moda Ani, I acknowledge, I thank you for returning my soul to me, for giving me a life of significance, for renewing my contract and my mission in this world. If a person has that in place, like in business, they say, no business can function without a mission statement. When you have your mission in place, everything else follows from there, because then every detail of your life matters, and it's incumbent upon you, and it behooves you to fill it with meaning and purpose, which is to look at how you and your unique skills and your unique opportunities and everything that you were blessed with, how you can use that to make your little corner of the world a better place, a holier place, a more sacred place, a more meaningful place. So this story that goes back years, to me, captures so much of the essence of what I tried to convey in this book. Obviously, it's one key point, but that is like the driving force, because very often I find in counseling people and speaking to people about many of their issues, many people don't necessarily feel that they are that significant. And therefore they don't necessarily feel they have to fight. Doesn't work out. A lot of people live in fear, in insecurity, and other factors that weaken our spirit, But when you know, and I know that you are put here and you have a real mission to accomplish. So you're like blessed with with the music that only you can play, then the rest of the symphony will not be complete without you. And the world can never be complete without you doing your job. So each one of us has that beautiful music, has that beautiful soul within us. And if you can find a way to express it and the courage to express it, so not only is it good for you, it's good for all of us because we complement each other. We all need each other, and each one of us fills in another part of the puzzle. That's why I go back to what I said, the opening remarks. That's why I feel honored. When I meet people, we are kindred spirits. Maybe we don't know each other's names, or maybe we do. We may not have met, but on a soul level, we are connected. And as that connection is meant to empower each of us, myself and yourself, in ways to make us even greater people, but most importantly, to put it in simple terms, to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I always ask people, are you part of the problem or you're part of the solution? And some people say, yeah, I'm not sure. Or, like the guy that said, I used to think I was indecisive. Now I'm not so sure. If you're not sure, you're probably more part of the problem. So I want to bless you all and say the following. My father was a journalist, and he would always tell me, he said, there are three types of people: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who ask what happened. As I would want to bless each one of you, that we should be people who make things happen. Don't be a bystander, observing, watching others. Initiate, because you have something to give that nobody else can give but you. And surround yourself with people who support that. Hopefully, partially my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, helps you get to that place. But there are other books and there are other people, and beautiful rabbis like your Rabbi Hecht and others that you will meet in your life, that we empower each other to really become ambassadors. We are carriers of light. We're not just waiting for things to happen. We're proactive, not reactive. And that wherever we go, we have a light to give. And whoever you are, you have your sphere of influence, people you know at work, home, family, strangers, places you may travel to. Wherever you go, you are being led there because you have something unique to contribute that you and only you can contribute. I really believe that's like at the heart of so much of what makes a life worth living, a meaningful life, living up to your destiny, to your calling, and of course to God's calling to each one of us. And when you have that, then you can teach your children and grandchildren this message. Imagine our children every day would hear in the morning and the evening, not just I love you, but you have something unique to contribute, not out of arrogance, humility, out of responsibility. And humility, what it would do, how many problems would it preempt and prevent the mere fact that you feel you have that powerful value, that you can influence in a good way. The more you influence others, the less you're influenced by them. So may the best defense is offense in giving of that light. So God bless each one of you to live up to your calling. Oliver Wendell Holmes, I'll just conclude with a poem that he wrote, a very tragic poem, where he says, it's called The Voiceless. And he says, alas, to those that die with their song still inside them. How sad is it if someone dies with their song still inside them? Our goal here is the exact opposite, is to sing your song and to reveal it and let others benefit from it, and all of us complement each other in this direction. And when we do that all, it joins together to the grand symphony, what we call the coming of Mashiach, a Geula, where the whole world, everyone sings their unique song, and together, harmony within diversity, create the most beautiful symphony possible in literally personal and a global transformation. So thank you. I'll be happy to take questions, but I thank you for listening, and I hope my words were meaningful and were words from the heart that enter the heart, which is such a fundamental principle that I quote in the book as well.
Rabbi Jacobson, thank you very much. Every week when we go through the chapters, we always have some things in the chapter that we don't necessarily understand. I don't remember offhand what it was, but I'm sure some people here have some questions. And if you'll just unmute yourself, or you can put your hand up like this if you have something you want to share or ask the rabbi. Sheldon, go ahead. Just unmute yourself first, and then we'll go for it.
First of all, I'd like to thank the rabbi for his inspiring speech. And today is especially meaningful to me because it's my 53rd anniversary.
Ah.
And I will have some wonderful words to share with my wife in reviewing what you had to say.
Beautiful.
Sheldon, thank you so much.
Sheldon, let me just say, so Mazel Tov, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And 53 in Hebrew is actually a gematria. It's the numerical equivalent of gan, of garden. So may your marriage continue to blossom like a garden and just get better and greater in your love and your connection with your wife and your family and so on.
Halavai.
Amen.
53 parshas in the Torah. Anybody else want to ask the rabbi a question or comment? Millie? Go ahead. You just need to unmute yourself, Millie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
I just wanted to say I'm loving the book. It's the Jewish perspective and how it relates to our everyday living. It gives me a lot to think about. I have learned a lot. This book attracts non-religious Jews to get a better understanding and wait a minute. A better understanding of our own religion and how we observe Judaism.
Millie is on the club every single week together with most of the people here, and thank God we've really learned a lot together. We've grown a lot together as well. So Millie, thank you for all your weekly comments and for this one as well.
Thank you, Millie. Very touching. I'm very touched by your words. I appreciate them.
Anybody else want to share something? Michael, go ahead.
Okay, I'm debating whether or not. Hi, rabbis. I've also enjoyed reading the book, and I've said before to this group that so much of this is more of an outline than a how-to. It just opens your eyes to certain things. But and fortunately, I haven't been troubled. Maybe I have been troubled and don't know about it. But so I haven't really sought solutions that have been presented in this book. But if somebody was seeking solutions, like in this last section, how to lead you to the other thought, or even that woman who tried to speak to you at that book signing, the book doesn't give any indication of what to do. And maybe purposely so. I mean, some people, I've never undergone counseling. Some people take great, they find that very useful. Some people have to go beyond that and seek medical advice. Some people go to their religious leader. And by the way, I think this applies to more than just Jews. They could go to their rabbi, their priest, their minister, or the imam, whatever it is. But you don't suggest that here. The implication is kind of like looking into yourself. But sometimes people can't do it that way. Was that purposely done that way? Or did you consider putting that in there? Or for further help, dial 611 or something like that? It just seems that it doesn't tell people exactly what to do other than look inside.
Well, look, I guess every reader sees what they see. The woman in St. Louis, for her, that message changed her life. And it set her on a course of finding deeper purpose in her life. I believe in every chapter, I make practical suggestions, and they include also, in some cases, to speak to a mentor or a friend and a colleague. Look, a book can only do that much. A book is not a cookbook. It's not like telling you how to bake the cake. when you write a book of this nature, you have to keep two things in mind. It has to have a practical element, but it also has to be able to be customized to different people, because the book has been sold over 500,000 copies in the United States alone. So each person has to be able to fit it to their needs. So that's the challenge of how you write something that on one hand can be practical and customized, but it's broad enough that different people can apply it in their own way. So in every chapter, there are actual suggestions down to real actions to be taken. Like if we talk about the chapter on birth, there's a whole section of how to celebrate a birthday. That on your birthday, here are things you can do. Gather friends together, study together, give charity. So there are many things in each chapter that talk about practical application, which I believe can be customized. And again, at the same time, a book is a book. A book is meant to be part of a journey. I don't know if any one book can answer every problem and address every issue. Like, for example, the chapter on depression includes going to medical professionals if there's some clinical issue, because as much as a chapter can tell you about depression, every person dealing with it may have to have more help, medication or therapy and so on. But at the same time, the book will go through the spiritual and psychological elements of depression and things that each one of us, again, can do and focus on. So that's my understanding of the book. And I believe has, as I said, every chapter very explicitly has a section that talks about what you can do.
Michael, thank you so much. Is there anybody else who wants to ask? Malka, go ahead.
Well, first of all, Rabbi Jacobson, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for this beautiful book. As Michael said, it's an outline. I grew up kind of in a Lubavitcher home, so it's the outline. But it encompasses everything from birth to death. I really didn't have a question. I was thinking, because Rabbi, last week you said, think what question you have. I find this book encompassing so much. Of course, books can be written about each and every chapter here. But your story really touched me because I am involved ongoing with a person who's dealing with that same thing, who's such an incredible human being and love of everybody who knows this person. And underneath, there is such an emptiness and even suicidal thoughts. So for some reason, you started with your story, and I would love, if possible, to even get a copy, of course, without names of that, to share with that person, which I can reach out later to find out. But in this particular chapter that we just did, A Day of a Life, it seems like a mundane. There is really not much is being said yet, so much. And on 145, there is that little story about a workman who took the time in the middle of the day to read Tehillim, and he was asked why. And he said, why is it, so the thing is that we have to remind ourselves throughout the day. I'm sorry, let me say it again. It's page 45. It said, the mission of God is to that God asks you to fulfill is to refine yourself in every aspect of your life. And then the next paragraph, how do you become godly? By connecting to your soul. And this little young man who was reading Tehillim in the middle of the day, continuously reminding himself, and I'm trying to connect it to what you were telling us about this woman. And by connecting to our soul, to who we are as a person, why are we here, a constant reminder will give us the mission to fulfill what we are here to do. And thank you again, Rabbi, and it's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Rabbi Jacobson, thank you, Malcolm. Rabbi Jacobson, a few people asked me if you can just share your email address or a way to contact you. I'll write it on the group. And
Absolutely.
then we'll close out with that.
So first of all, Malka, thank you for your words. Thank you, all of you, for your beautiful words. And look, it's not over. You can always contact me if you have further questions. I'm accessible. So first of all, my website is meaningfullife.com. Meaningful, like the name of the book, meaningfullife.com. A lot of resources and programs that I do on an ongoing basis. My personal email is Simon, like my name, Simon, SIMON, @meaningfullife.com. You can feel free to contact me or write to me. I would also say, if you're interested, I send out almost on a daily basis, different emails, short thoughts, short videos, longer essays. So all free subscriptions, you can subscribe and see if it's something you would prefer or like. And really, I mean, please take advantage. I'm an ally, resource, anything that could help you in your journey, your psychological, spiritual, emotional journey. You know, just as we have to nurture our bodies, we have to nurture our souls. And see me as a resource in that way, in any way I could be of help. And I thank Rabbi Hecht for making this happen and all of you. So that's how you reach me. Meaningfullife.com is the website, and Simon@meaningfullife.com is my personal email address. We're also on all the social media, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, you name it. So
Last question from Isaac before we close off. Last question.
sure.
Myself,
Go for it.
Rabbi,
Isaac.
nice meeting you. I work in trade shows and convention, and I heard a lot of speakers in my life. I got to compliment you. You're one of the best I ever heard. I
Thank you.
really enjoyed your presentation, your speech. I would like to subscribe for your presentations and everything else. I completely agree with Michael and Malka about your book. But you're a wonderful person and a wonderful speaker. You touched me with your speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if all you have to do is either send me in my email, your email address, and we'll subscribe you, or you can subscribe yourself at the website at meaningfullife.com. Either way, it's very easy to do.
Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
joining. God bless you all, and we'll keep you posted about further events that are coming up. We're going to continue reading the second half of the book, starting hopefully next week. All the best. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
God
you,
bless
Rabbi.
you all.
Thank you, both rabbis.